All right. Um, Hopefully other folks will trickle on in. Megan, if you can admit people as at least while I'm talking, as they show up. Okay. Um, I'm going to go ahead and share first. Uh, as I said, welcome to this third Lunch and Learn on this arc from blueprint to budget, where we're looking at stormwater management strategies. Um, This is the final Lunch and Learn. We'll talk about what's next in a little bit, but it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. We have two. We have three listed. I'm going to tell you the circumstance in a little bit, but we're lucky to have Devin Gray, who is the Director of Commonwealth Financing and Authority Programs at the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. And we also have Adrian Smochek, who is the Recreation and Conservation Advisor to this region, or to the southwest part of the state from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. A long time ago, when we were conceiving this, when the government was open, we were lucky to get Laurel McGinley, who is with the Federal Highway Administration. She was going to talk about resilience and adding stormwater management enhancements to flood planning and that sort of thing. But because of the governmental closure, she's not available to speak today. So she apologizes, and it's all beyond our control. Couple of things. PDHs, we originally thought an hour. We'll see how things go. If we go an hour, we'll give you an hour. Otherwise, we're going to have to give you half or 3/4 of an hour due to this change in schedule. Please do enter questions in the chat as they go. We were thinking both speakers could speak, and then you could address them as a panel. That way, as your question occurs, it will be preserved and ready when we get to that point. But we'll also have 5 minutes of question right after each talk for anything specific or very urgent. The last thing I'd like to say is this is leading up to a day-long event in this December, the IRISE Stormwater Symposium. This is the second one. The first one was held 2 years ago. Again, there's going to be PDHs, but more important, we're going to have a really broad range of interesting and exciting speakers talking about stormwater management in this part of the state, something that is a little different than the wider state. We have some specifics, we have specific challenges, and we're going to be sending out registration information very, very soon. And with that, let me thank you one more time, and I'm going to pass it over to Devin.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And let me get my screen shared here real quick. There we go. Go on. And share. There we go. That should be working now. So again, thank you so much for the lovely introduction there. I'm super happy to be able to join you guys today. I am Devin Gray. I'm the Director of the Commonwealth Financing Authority Programs Division at the Department of Community and Economic Development. But that is a whole lot of syllables. So I'm also just the CFA Programs Division Director at DCED. I'm going to talk to you today about the Act 13 programs and the local share account program. And we will start with Act 13 as soon as this lets me. There we go. The Act 13 programs. So the Act 13 programs were set up, I think, at the early 2000s, somewhere around 2008, I want to say. And they are funded using the Marcellus Shale Legacy Fund, which is funded through impact fees from fracking and other activities like that in Pennsylvania. It's a set of 7 programs. I'm going to talk about 2 of them today, the Watershed Restoration and Protection Program and the Flood Mitigation Program. I will also refer to those as either Watershed or WRP or FMP for flood mitigation. All of these programs have a common applicant pool. So eligible applicants here are municipalities, councils of government, authorized organizations, institutes of higher education, watershed organizations, and for-profit businesses. Most of those are pretty straightforward. But for the authorized organization, that is defined for these programs as an entity involved in research, restoration, rehabilitation, planning, acquisition, development, education, or other activities which furthers the protection, enhancement, conservation, preservation, or enjoyment for this Commonwealth's environmental conservation, recreation, or similar resources. The organization has to be a tax-exempt 501c3 and registered with the Bureau of Charitable Organizations or an educational institution involved in these authorized activities or municipal authority. And for the for-profit businesses, that will be other than producers of natural gas as defined in Act 13. But for watershed restoration and protection program, the eligible projects here can be broken down into kind of these basic categories. So we have implementing runoff controls or runoff reduction best management practices or BMPs for agricultural operations and for urban or residential areas, repair and maintenance of existing watershed protection BMPs addressing agricultural, urban, residential, and degraded stream areas, watershed protection or watershed projects that refurbish, restore, or create stream bank or stream channel stabilization, and monitoring of water quality to track NPS load reductions. With stormwater, really that usually falls under those runoff control BMPs, but we do stormwater quite frequently here. One example project that we've done in the past was pollutant reduction plan implementation or other similar improvements as part of a municipal separate storm sewer MS4 permit. So under the watershed program, the eligible project costs here are going to be construction, in-stream monitoring costs, engineering, permits, inspection, and admin. With construction, we do allow construction contingencies, but they are limited to 5% of whatever those eligible construction costs are. With engineering and design, we do cap that at 10% of the grant amount. However, because this grant has a required match amount, the excess engineering can be used as match. For inspection costs, that would be inspections that are relative to the construction of an eligible project. So like the actual inspection of the project. For construction observation, management, and oversight, those would be considered engineering costs and be subject to that 10% cap. And for admin costs, these are administrative costs for actually administering the grant. So those are capped at 2% of the grant amount, and we can't use anything extra as match. This can be staff time for, putting documents together or sending emails, communications, what have you. We can cover legal costs here. We can cover advertising costs, really anything to do with actually administering the grant. With watershed, the maximum grant amount we can do is $300,000, and then there is a 15% cash match. That is 15% of the total project cost, not 15% of the grant. So if you have a project that is $100,000, you can have an $85,000 grant with $15,000 of cash match to that. If you have a $300,000 project, it would be $45,000 of match with $255,000 of grant. The other program we have here is the flood mitigation program. The projects under this, I don't have a whole slide for it because it's pretty simple. It is projects authorized by a flood protection authority, by PA Department of Environmental Protection, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, or the U.S. Department of Agricultural's Natural Resource Conservation Service, or identified by a local government for flood mitigation. So as long as it's a project that is identified for flood mitigation, it is eligible, and it does have to have a total cost of $50,000 or more. We see stormwater projects come through here fairly often because that can do a lot to help with flooding. The eligible costs for these programs or for these projects would be acquisition of land for right-of-ways and easements that are necessary to construct an eligible project. If it is an authorized organization that is applying, which as a reminder is those 501c3s, if they're going to use grant funds for acquisition, we do require a written consent from the county and municipality in which the land is situated just to approve the acquisition. If it is from the municipality itself, we don't need that letter. We can cover construction costs, so construction improvement, expansion, debris removal, repair, or rehabilitation for the project. And again, we have that 5% contingency there on the construction projects. We have engineering and construction oversight. Construction engineering is again capped at 10% of the grant award, with the excess being eligible to be used as match. costs to secure appropriate bonds and insurance for the project, or admin costs. Admin costs are capped at 2% of the grant again and cannot be used as match, just like with watershed restoration. With flood mitigation, the grant awards can go up to 500,000. And again, it is a 15% match, so that would be 85% of the eligible project cost amount would be the grant amount. We can use land value as match for the flood mitigation program. So if you have unimproved land that is going to be developed as part of flood mitigation project, you can use that land value as match. If you have a project where you think that might be the case, I would encourage you to reach out to us here at DCD so that we can talk to you and make sure everything lines up for that. And with flood mitigation, we do have an allowance for eligible costs incurred up to 1 year prior to grant submittal can be used as match. So if you have some engineering or design work that has to happen before the project is submitted for grant funding, we can use that as matching funds. So those Act 13 programs are an annual program. They are accepted, or they're open every year from February 1st through May 31st. And questions on that program can come straight to me. I've got my email address on there along with my phone number. It'll show up a couple other times throughout here. But I work on all of those programs, so I would be happy to answer any questions that come up for that. Next program I'm going to talk about is a local share account program, specifically local share account statewide, or LSA. So the LSA statewide program, the eligible applicants here are going to be municipalities or counties, municipal authorities, economic development agencies or redevelopment authorities, land banks, and councils of government. The nonprofits are not eligible as applicants here. However, one of these eligible applicants can apply on behalf of a nonprofit, which I get into here. The eligible projects here are any project in the public interest, as long as it exceeds 25,000. Stormwater funding, generally speaking, would be in the public interest, so it would be an eligible project here. The maximum grant here is $1 million, and unlike with watershed and flood mitigation, there is no required match here. However, as you might guess by the wide net of projects in the public interest, we get a lot of applications for this program, so it is fairly competitive. As I mentioned earlier, eligible applicants can apply on behalf of nonprofits, but the project just needs to be owned and maintained by either the eligible applicant or the nonprofit. Like I said, no match required, but much more competitive program. This program can be used as match for watershed or flood mitigation. With the matching funds on those programs, we don't have any restrictions on where they come from, other than we won't use a watershed grant to match funds for another watershed grant. That's about the only restriction we have there. But if you have another type of grant or other, federal funding, state funding, local funding, private funding, we're happy to use any of that as match. We don't really restrict anything there. So the eligible project costs under LSA statewide are going to be construction costs, acquisition costs, infrastructure costs, purchase of vehicles, machinery, or equipment, planning projects, engineering, design, inspection, and permit fees, and admin costs. Just like with the watershed and the flood mitigation program, engineering is going to be capped at 10% of the grant amount, and admin costs will be capped at 2% of the grant amount. With this program, the applications are accepted annually from September 1st through November 30th. So we are currently accepting applications right now. There are also some county-specific LSA programs. They're a little bit different, but I think the gist of them is pretty much the same. I don't oversee those programs directly, but they are very similar. Those are open from, I believe it's August 1st through the end of September, through September 30th. So counties, August and September, and then for statewide, it is September through November. Questions on this program can be directed to the program manager, Jonathan Brett. I've got his email address and phone number there, and I can make sure I send these slides over to Dan here when we're done if you want to distribute them to everybody else, just in case anybody needs that information. Just some other general information about all of our program or all of our grants here. Prevailing wage requirements will apply for all of these. So if you're doing a project and using grant funds, you'll need to register it with the Department of Labor and Industry and get a prevailing wage determination on that. The guidelines for any of our programs can be downloaded at dcd.pa.gov. There's a couple of ways you can get there. You can either, from the main page, there is a programs and funding tab in the header. If If you hover over it, you'll see one that just says Commonwealth Financing Authority page. Click on that and you'll see a big box that says programs. One of them is Act 13, one of them is LSA. Alternatively, if you use the search bar on the top right, either type in LSA, GTR, or not GTRP, sorry, WRP or FMP. That'll get you in any of these, or use the full title of the grant. That'll pull them up pretty easily. And we have some FAQs for some of these, but we have the guidelines for all of them, so you can check those out. The applications are all submitted through the website that I've got written out there. That is our online application portal. We use it for all of our programs. When you go through there, there is a $100 application fee for all of these. It'll be paid electronically. Don't worry about missing it. It won't let you. You'll get to the end of your application. It'll take you to a separate page to make that payment, and then you'll be able to come back and finish submitting. So once again, I've got my contact information there if you have any questions, but you can also contact our Center for Business Financing, which is where the CFA Programs Division lies. I've got the phone number there for that. And otherwise, that is sort of the end of my bit here. Got my info up there again. So if there are any questions, I can answer those here for the next few minutes, and then I'll turn it over to Adrian.
Thank you very much, Devin.
Yeah, of course.
Are there questions from the wider audience? I don't see any in the chat. So, Devin, what are some good examples of how people have used some of these grants in this portion of the southwest portion of the state? Do you have things that come to mind as being really interesting or effective?
Oh gosh.
We could go whole state if it would help.
Yeah. I mean, with both of them, we've seen a lot of work, less directly with stormwater, but with just watershed restoration, we've seen a lot of stream restoration projects come through. There's been some work to remove some old and dangerous dams and restore like floodplains and get things back the way that they used to be. We've also done some restoration to restore streams back to their original like natural flow through an area. So those are always really interesting to see the results of. I know there's been some incredible work with the flood mitigation program. Back when I was an analyst, I remember I had one that I looked at where they sent pictures of the flooding. And at first I thought it was a lake, and then I realized I was looking at a car top sticking up out of the water. So, and I've seen some of the after pictures there too, and it really did make a difference. There's been some really innovative stuff with just sort of like natural projects, kind of using natural reconstruction to reshape this stuff, get the water to run off the way we want it to. But honestly, with stormwater, we also see a lot of just culverts, repairing storm systems. What I spoke about today was specifically our annual programs. They're always going to come back around. We do have some other ones that sometimes pop up. Like this last year, we had the PA Small Water and Sewer Program. That doesn't come around every single year, but whenever we get funding for it, that's another great sort of like avenue to do the restoration on these.
Okay. Other folks have questions. All right, let's thank Devin once again, and Devin will be here at the end if you do have questions that crop up. And at this point, we can switch over to Adrian and hear about DCNR's opportunities.
I will stop sharing that.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adrian Smochek, and I have the privilege of serving as a regional advisor in the Southwest region for DCNR's Bureau of Recreation and Conservation. So we just want to thank the University of Pittsburgh, the IRISE program, and its partners at the Pennsylvania Water Collaboratory and the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission for inviting us to participate today. We're always looking forward to opportunities to share our program and get the word out there. And we're looking forward to helping you learn a little bit about how our grant programming might be helpful in developing your projects. If you're already acquainted a little bit with DCNR, some of this may look familiar to you, but if not, we're eager to kind of give you an introduction to how our programming might be helpful to you. And hopefully everyone is seeing my screen at this point. Okay. So most people know through DCNR through our Bureau of State Parks. We manage 124 state parks through that particular bureau. And we also manage 2 million plus acres of state forest lands across the Commonwealth. Our bureau is a little bit smaller, but we are small but mighty, we like to say. And in the Bureau of Recreation and Conservation, we have the mission of being a leader in advancing the greening of Pennsylvania, also protecting the Commonwealth natural and heritage resources, and providing recreational opportunities for all to enjoy. And the biggest way that we are able to carry out that mission is by partnering with you all in your agencies and communities. We do that through our Community Conservation Partnerships program, known as C2P2 for short. Our grants are making a difference across the Commonwealth each and every year in the annual round that we're able to award. In last year's regular round in 2024, those were applications that we received and awarded in 2024. We were able to award more than 300 total projects. So that included improvements to more than 100 local parks, 36 trail projects, the acquisition of over 6,800 acres of land for critical habitat and public recreation. And we also helped permanently protect those lands as well, and a particular interest potentially to this audience, we restored or enhanced access to 19 different waterways across the state and planted 284 acres of trees and buffers and meadows. In all, we distributed more than $81.5 million through our grant program. I think that totals over the years since our program started in 1995, over 8,000 total projects. And I find it interesting to note that at least 70% of Pennsylvania municipalities have had at least one of our projects in their borders. And we like to throw out the statistic as well that more than 90% of Pennsylvanians live in a municipality that has received funding for a project through DCNR. First point of contact with our bureau should be your regional advisor. In a portion of the Southwest, a 5-county territory in the Southwest that you can see here on the screen in like the reddish brown color, I would be the regional advisor that you would reach out to. You will note that the city of Pittsburgh shows up in a little bit of a different color, that greenish color there, and the counties of Beaver, Washington, Greene, Fayette, and Westmoreland. That's our Western Regional Manager, Adam Mattis, and he still provides advising services to those areas. In case we have anyone else on from our neighbors to the north or further east, you can see that we have folks in those regions as well. Probably for the most of you on the call today, I would be your first point of contact though, and you can see my phone number and email address on the screen. And any questions you have, do not be afraid to reach out and talk with us. That's our primary role. I live within the region. I work within the region. I have an office in downtown Pittsburgh. I live in Indiana County and I'm all over the place throughout those 5 counties. So I'm happy to meet with you, talk with you. That's really our purpose as regional advisors, is to be your first point of contact and to help you develop a good and competitive project. We do that by conducting site visits, answering questions on your project, hopefully resolving any issues prior to your application so that you can have a good and competitive application when you come to us. So the sooner you reach out, the better. If you're in development of an idea, particularly with specialized interests like stormwater projects, it's very beneficial to reach out, engage us, and we can talk through everything to make sure that your expenses are all eligible and that we can work through that to make sure you present it in a way that is going to be competitive within our program. Another good place for information, if you'd like to poke around and just see what's out there before you reach out to me, you can certainly visit our grant customer service portal. Our website is a wealth of information, but this particular section, which is the grant application portal, we no longer accept paper applications. Everything you would do related to the grant program is through this portal. So you would visit our Community Conservation Partnership Program. You can see that in the green bar. There are active links all throughout the application portal. There's no harm in getting in there and just taking a look. You won't be able to start an application currently until the grant application window is open, but you can access all of the information, the active links to fact sheets and policies, all of our frequently asked questions, and it kind of helps you with a framework of how things are broken out into our different program types as well. There are also some helpful videos on our YouTube channel to kind of walk you through how to use the portal too, if you find yourself stumped a little. And it can be a lot early on. So if you have any issues navigating it, again, please reach out. I'd like to give you just an overview of our timeline. Our funding cycle is annual. We kick things off with an annual virtual grant workshop, and this year it will be on November 6th. I have a QR code later on the presentation here that you can scan if you're interested in registering for that. It's a general session, and then it's followed by some programmatic breakout sessions. And there are recorded versions that will be posted after the event. So if you can't make it, that's not a reason to not take a look at the information. It will be posted and shared with you afterward. Our grant round opens for application January 12th this coming year, and it remains open through a firm deadline of April 30th at 4 p.m. So that's a little bit different than past years. If any of you are familiar with our timeline from past years, we usually closed in early April, and this year we're extending it out by a few weeks to give you a little extra time through the end of April. Throughout the spring and summer, we take the time to review and rank and score the applications and projects we receive and make recommendations to our bureau on what should be funded within our regions. Usually in the fall is when our announcement happens. We have not made that announcement yet this year due to the state budget impasse, but we hope that's coming soon. So if you apply in the spring, you would usually find out in the fall sometime whether or not you were selected for award, and your contract start date would begin in January of the following year. So if you apply this coming spring in 2026, the earliest that you would be able to start your work would be likely spring or summer of 2027. So you're at least a year out with planning. To give you an idea of who is eligible to apply for the funding, these are guidelines that are set forth in the legislation that establishes our funding source. We fund municipalities. That's probably the largest applicant type that we see and has the largest amount of our funding available to them. So often we would encourage you to partner with a municipality whenever possible. It includes counties, townships, boroughs, cities, municipal agencies. So any entity that is established through a municipality, councils of government, municipal authorities, nonprofit organizations, pre-qualified land trusts, and in some very specific cases using snowmobile and ATV funds, we're able to work with for-profits. It is also a big question that we are asked, what are we able to accept as match and what are the matching requirements? For the vast majority of our programming, we require a 50-50 match or dollar for each project. It is not eligible if it is spent before your contract start date, and it must be considered secure at the time of application. Doesn't necessarily mean we check your bank account, but we do ask you to commit to the match. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. And also just as a point to mention that we do accept a variety of different types of match sources. Cash match is absolutely eligible. So local, state, federal, and private funding sources for cash match, as long as they're not coming from other DCNR programming. We absolutely do see other state programming, PennDOT funding. Our counterparts at DCED often provide matching funding that's eligible. So those types of sources for cash are always eligible. As for non-cash match, you are absolutely able to use non-cash match. Things like your in-house staff time and equipment time, volunteer time, so community build days or tree planting efforts, those types of things. Donations of services and goods and land are all potentially eligible. If you're thinking about alternative match sources, we would absolutely recommend that you reach out and talk that through with us so we can make sure that it's all documented and that we have what we need to make sure it's eligible for you. And so down to the nuts and bolts of it, what is it that we fund? What types of projects can we fund? This is just a brief introduction to our program types. As you can see, we have a variety of programs, everything from planning and trail work to state and regional partnerships. Given the type of work that we do and our focus on outdoor recreation, in addition to the conservation related work, we may not be the first thought that comes to mind as a source for stormwater related funding, but we do incorporate stormwater related elements into the projects that we fund. So based on the examples that we funded in the past, I wanted to drill down from this broad overview and focus on a couple of main program types that are relevant with this type of work. First, I'd like to share our rivers conservation program. And this particular program funds water-based recreation and conservation projects, everything from stream and wetland restoration, small dam removal, boat launches, boardwalks, fishing access, and river and watershed conservation planning. Those things are all eligible under this particular program type. We also fund habitat improvement, watershed restoration, and riparian buffer installation as part of this particular program type. And you can see on the slide here, there is a stream restoration project informational signage at this particular site in Cranberry Township. I'd like to just take a quick moment and provide that as an example of this particular project type. This was a stream bank stabilization project that restored 525 feet of a tributary to Brush Creek. And the site of this work was Community Park in Cranberry Township, Butler County. So we installed some stormwater management measures, including planting of a riparian forest buffer. It's difficult to photograph this adequately in its natural state, but you can see a little bit of a diagram here. And the informational signage from this site, as well as the FAR photograph. The project constructed a plunge pool or a stilling basin, and this was an excavated pool of water that was lined with stone used to dissipate the energy from high velocity water flow. So the water flowing out of these large drainage pipes is captured and dissipated, and it neutralizes the force of the water and prevents erosion. So essentially there are cross walls or large stone peaks built into the basin and then downstream a little bit that's followed by a series of pool and riffle style changes in the elevation in the stream bed, and that allows the flow of water. It allows these kind of stopping points to collect debris, adds oxygen to the water, and improves the quality for aquatic life. So all of those good things related to conservation work and the stabilization of this stream. And this is within a community park. So it's even better that they installed some informational signage to educate the public on the work that they were doing here. So this was a total project cost of $262,000, and we were able to award half of that cost through our rivers conservation program. Another program type that we offer in cooperation with our colleagues in the Bureau of Forestry is our community watershed forestry program. And these are grants to support riparian forest buffer installations, lawn conversions, urban and community forestry projects like tree plantings and tree inventories. This program can assist with stormwater needs by installing additional acreage of forested buffers. You can see a couple of photos of some relatively local projects in Beaver and Allegheny counties. The distinction between this and the last program I mentioned, the Rivers Conservation Program, is often the scope of work. If there are additional items within the scope of work, like recreational amenities or fishing access, that definitely falls in the Rivers program. If it's strictly related to plantings and riparian buffers, that would be within this community watershed forestry program. One of the nice things is that it only requires a 20% match as opposed to the 50% match of the Rivers program. I also wanted to mention acquisition. It might not be the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about water and water resources, but our acquisition program is able to help communities acquire land, not just for recreation, but also for conservation purposes. And in the photograph, you'll see the Upper Meeks Run land acquisition project that happened with some assistance through our funding. And this is in Moon Township, Allegheny County. They acquired about 17.5 acres that protect the Montour Run watershed. So essentially, Meeks Run is one of the most biologically diverse streams in the watershed. It's one of only 2 unimpaired tributaries to Montour Run. So in this way, land conservation can proactively contribute to minimizing stormwater management impacts. And finally, this is probably our most popular program type, park rehabilitation and development. In this particular program type, we are able to construct new parks and redevelop existing park space, build park infrastructure like ball fields, pavilions, sports courts, walking paths, other recreational amenities, typically awarding between $100,000 and $250,000 for a project. Stormwater elements can absolutely be built into these projects. This is probably the easiest way and the most common way for us to assist with any stormwater needs in the community. And these are typically projects that develop a park but contain elements as part of the overall larger design. So this is best done when they are thoughtfully incorporated and serve the purpose of either protecting park infrastructure or aiding with drainage, while also allowing that community green space to address climate-related impacts such as stormwater mitigation. On the slide, you'll notice an example of the stormwater inlet with a debris cage surrounded by a rain garden planting. That's at Eagles View Park in Coriopolis. In the background of that photograph, you can see some green space and an amphitheater for the community along the river. It's a really beautiful space, and they've done a nice job of working in some greening and green infrastructure there. Additionally, in the second photo, you'll see stormwater infrastructure as part of the greening of a parking area at the White Township Recreation Complex in Indiana County. So you can see kind of the lack of higher curbs and the angling and slope of the parking lot allows water flow into the grass area and into the rock area before it would actually hit that drainage. So it's a really nice way of kind of capturing some of the runoff within the parking lot. And both of these examples are park projects with more comprehensive scopes of work that are really focused on their recreational infrastructure, but that work in some of that stormwater into those larger projects. Finally, I just wanted to mention that when done with intention, these green and sustainable elements can have a positive impact on how well a project scores with us. Particularly, we ask you for the green and sustainable measures of a project. We like to see those measures built into every project that we fund. So we want to see that happen, and we're looking for measures that either reduce climate change impact or adapt to climate change. We do provide you with some resources to do that through our Green and Sustainable Community Parks webpage. It gives you some examples and tools of green practices. So not only stormwater measures, but native tree plantings, rain gardens, pervious surfaces. Essentially, we're looking for you to implement things that are the best possible practices for the space that you're using. And, if those are implemented well, do you kind of go above and beyond the basic implementation of what would be green and sustainable for your space? So we often get questions on what does that look like? How can I green my project? How can I answer this question effectively? And so sometimes we can tell if that's an afterthought. We would definitely encourage you to want to build these things in thoughtfully. In the case of this audience, I would say that it's probably a little bit of a different consideration. So maybe think about how you can work with community leaders, possibly your parks and recreation professionals, to meet your community's recreation needs and also your conservation needs. It's possible that those green spaces can be really, really good opportunities to incorporate something to address stormwater while providing that community hub for recreation. So we've seen some amazing projects that really rethink those public green spaces. And I wish I had more time to even go into bigger examples of how that can be done. We can save those for another day, but just know that this is something that absolutely adds value to your project when coming to us with an overall recreation project as well. Often we see funding leverage, and that's really, I think, the point of this particular seminar here is to make sure that you are aware there are ways to leverage money. And I just wanted to give you an overview of some of the other programs that we often see leveraged with our funding throughout the state. Obviously, our partners at the Department of Community and Economic Development, they're a great partner to us, and we see their funding used very regularly in combination with ours for some excellent projects. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Transportation, our partners at Penvest. There's some other sources as well, but there is funding out there. It's definitely challenging to try to combine those sources. But I think what I can say to sort of sum it all up is reach out, talk to us, talk through your project. Let us know what you're thinking. Give us your project idea, and we can absolutely work with you on how do we make that work with what we have available to fit your needs. So we do often know each other throughout some of these funding sources as well, and we work well together. So It's not out of the realm of possibility to get several of us on a call together to hear about your project and really think through how we can make funding work together. So in conclusion with what I had to share with you, I just wanted to provide that QR code I promised. You can scan the QR code and register for our November 6th grant workshop. Again, a reminder, our grant round opens in January 12th, and closes April 30th. And all of the funding we offer is through that same time frame, that one annual application. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I've only listed my email here, but I am absolutely available by phone. And sometimes that's nice to just call and chat. I don't mind that at all. Happy to come out and visit your site. That's even better. I like to get my boots dirty. So do not hesitate to reach out. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. We really appreciate it. Once again, calling out to the wider audience for questions, if they have any. Let me check the chat again. I haven't closed that. Nothing in the chat. All right. Hearing none, let me ask you this. Can you think of a like particularly relevant and effective project where layering worked? I mean, what would be the case if I said, name the one thing where layering of funding really worked to make something spectacular? What would you say? What project would that be? If any.
You know, I had one in this particular presentation, and I had tailored a presentation some time ago for water related infrastructure and actually took it out just to try to keep things current. But a perfect example, and this is a little bit specialized, so I recognize that it's not necessarily going to work everywhere. But our partners with Armstrong Trails had done a project where they were able to rehabilitate the Brady Tunnel on the Armstrong Trail and did an incredible job of it. They were able to capture several different state funding sources, including funding from PennDOT through their multimodal programming. I believe our partners at DCED had some additional funding into the project. They really were creative with looking for options and how to fit those pieces together. One of the biggest challenges is often the timeline. It's just the timeline of, okay, how do I approach these different funders and make sure that this can work together? Because we all require a match. And to go to one funder and say, okay, I want to apply, but I'm applying for all of these other funding sources at the same time. How do I go about doing that? That can be really tough. And we can help you work through that. We know that it's difficult. We are under constraints with each program type on how to work with those timelines, but we can talk you through that. There are ways to apply to us and still go out and seek other funding sources at the same time. So it's not an impossibility. I see Devin's nodding as well. We know that people are doing this and that we encourage you doing this. And it's amazing some of the larger price tag projects that we're able to chip away at through those funding partnerships. So I think it really just the best thing you can do is just have those conversations. Start to open the door to the conversation. Talk early and maintain that relationship. It doesn't have to be, hey, we had a conversation and I don't want to reach out. Honestly, those folks that I mentioned with the project with the Brady Tunnel, they're frequent flyers in our inbox and on our phones because they know that they can call, they can reach out, they can talk to us about how that works to make sure they're on track with their project and that what they're doing is going to work with our guidelines. I know I didn't give you a specific rundown of their funding, exactly how that worked, and I do have it somewhere. And if anyone's interested in talking through those details, we can do that. But there are many good examples of how that works and how the funding can be layered. And it's tough. It's like I said, we're not maybe the first thing that you think of when you think of stormwater infrastructure or how to do that. But there are some excellent examples even throughout the Pittsburgh region and within the city of Pittsburgh that have done excellent jobs of using the space they have available to capture stormwater, and they do it in a really artistic and creative way that is aesthetically pleasing. And it's just amazing. It's amazing work. So it takes a lot of really big brains at the same table thinking it through. So collaboration, that's a lot of it.
And so, like, what I hear from that is a lot of it is communication with you and the other funders. And so, is that a capacity issue for you all, or I mean, is there more room for that, or is it going to be hard to sort of get into the regular conversation? I mean, I know, like, I run into capacity issues here with students coming in. I'm like, I'd like to answer the question, but but so how does that work on your agencies at least?
Devin, go ahead if you want to take a shot at it first. I'll comment after.
Sure, sure. So I know for us, certainly, especially like with Act 13, so like I mentioned, it's, watershed restoration, flood mitigation. Our Greenways program is also a part of that, which, Adrian, I'm sure you're familiar with our Greenways program. It's a pretty big one. Sewage facility, baseline water quality, and a couple other programs are in there too. So it's a lot all at once when that's closing. I can definitely run into capacity issues of me personally being able to answer every question. But all of our analysts are pretty well trained on these programs too. So when we start hitting those capacity things, we're usually able to field out some of the questions, and the analysts they know what they can answer, and they know when they hit something that they need to refer back to either myself or my counterpart with the Act 13 programs, Brian Eckert, and kind of bring it back to us. So that helps a lot with capacity for us, is just kind of being able to spread that out amongst our team. Um, yeah.
Thanks.
I would add to that, Dr. Bain, that we obviously we have limited staff, but at the same time, it's absolutely our job to be working within our region. The one thing I will say is reach out early. Don't wait until, okay, your grant application's due April 30th, and I'm going to reach out April 15th to talk to you about my project and let you know I'm applying. Don't wait. I may not have the time at that point. The best thing you can do is reach out early, very early as possible. Now is a great time to start talking about a spring application. Now is the time when I'm able to get out there and actually visit a site and talk in detail. We're happy to look at budgets. We're happy to look at site development drawings up front and review all of those things. Time and capacity does become an issue the further into the grant round being open we move, and that's when things start to get tight. So just reach out early as possible.
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
absolutely. And just on a similar note of timing for things, one thing to be aware of when you're applying for these grants, at least with DCD, it's a minimum of a 6-month timeline before we're going to get approvals. With those LSA ones, because it's so big, it's usually closer to a year. So just take that into account when you're looking at the funding. Earlier, as Adrian said, earlier is better.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up one last time to the wider audience for any questions. If we don't hear any,
I have a question.
yeah, Megan, that's
I'm
great.
curious about the geographic distribution of projects from both of your grant sources across the state. So thinking about where areas where it's been really successful and there might be like lessons learned or layering that we can learn from in this region if we are not as high up there as in other areas, or if we are great and what is working well.
I know, Megan, on the DCNR website, there is an interactive mapping tool where you can actually look at the geographic distribution of awards, and you can even search by program type. So that is available, and it's really kind of fascinating. I think in our general grant overview workshop that we offer annually, we've shown that big broad map of all the pinpoints across the state, communities that have received grant funding. When specifically talking about water, I know that our neighbors in the Chesapeake Bay region definitely have certain sources available to them that we unfortunately can't access here in this portion of the state. I know you probably know a lot about the effort to elevate the Ohio River Basin and definitely do more there to open up some additional funding sources as far as water related efforts go. But as far as DCNR funds go, there is absolutely a fairly even distribution as far as our dollars go across the state. Some of our funding sources are established as regional budgets. Our park development projects that I mentioned are our most popular type. That's the one where we can build stormwater infrastructure right into your park areas. Those are allocated on a regional budget. So if you were to come in and apply for that type of a project, you'd be competing across 10 county region within the Southwest here. So it is fairly competitive. We are able to award a little less than half of the applications that we receive in a given grant round. But that's not to discourage you. That's just to let you know that it's even more important to talk to us and make sure you've got a good, tight application. So there are other program types that compete on a statewide level, things like our trails projects, land acquisition. Those are a statewide pot of money. And really, it's based on the scoring. It's not necessarily a geographic distribution. Hope that
Yeah.
helped.
Yeah, and I would say it's for us, it's really pretty widespread. Really, if I go anywhere in the state, we've got some kind of a project going on there. I think areas that maybe get or see more projects funded are probably areas that are just applying for more projects. Like I know Philadelphia always has a number of applications in for any round of any program really. So we'll see a lot of projects happen there. But it's pretty widespread. Like I said, I don't think there's a place in the state you could go that I couldn't find something that we funded at some point. And I did just kind of want to add one note to our earlier discussion about like layering of funding. That's super great, especially for these bigger projects. Another thing to think about when you're designing your project and starting to apply for funding is phasing your project. You know, with watershed, flood mitigation, really any of our programs, we can only do one grant from that program per project. But if that project is broken up into phases, each of those phases is its own project. So especially if you have something that's going to take, 5-10 years to finish because of all the different work that's going on there, breaking it up can help cover some of the funding.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Well, please join me in thanking once again our two speakers. I think I've learned a lot. Hopefully you have too. We always appreciate people taking the time to tell us about how to get this stormwater challenges met. And I think we have a lot of resources here we've learned today, and it sounds like we can distribute some of these slides. So this will be posted on YouTube at some point as part of the IRISE, so you can come back and take a look there too if you want to do it that way. But thank you both once again. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you all around. Thanks much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Stop recording.